The red brick house had stood on Maple Lane for 50 years, weathering storms, winters, and the laughter of children who grew up inside its walls. My husband laid the foundation with his own 2 hands. Every scratch on the wood, every crack in the porch steps carried a memory. But that night, at my own dinner table, my children spoke as if those memories meant nothing. My eldest son pushed his chair back, his voice carrying the tone of false concern. "Mom, you don't need a big house anymore. What you need is proper care in a nursing home." The fork froze in my hand. I didn't answer. Then my daughter chimed in, her smile sharp enough to cut. "This place could sell for millions. We'll take care of the paperwork, you just rest." Their words hung in the air like a funeral bell. For a moment I looked at their faces I once kissed good night, wiped tears from, fed with my own hands, and all I saw were strangers. I didn't argue, I didn't shout. Instead, I set my fork down gently, folded the napkin on my lap, and lifted my eyes. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Interesting," I said. "Go ahead, try." They mistook my silence for surrender. What they didn't know was that I had already begun my fight. The next afternoon, I was out in the garden, watering the roses my husband planted decades ago. The sun was dipping low, painting the house in golden light. That was when I heard it, voices drifting from the garage. At first, I thought it was just neighbors, but then I caught the tone. My son's voice, low and sharp. "All we need is her signature. She won't even realize what she's signing. The buyer's ready." I froze, the hose slipping from my hand, water spilling onto the dirt. Then my daughter's laughter cut through the air, sweet but laced with steel. "She's 70. She can't keep up. By the time she figures it out, the deal will be done." Their words didn't just sting, they pierced. These were the children I raised, the ones who once begged me for bedtime stories, who ran through this very yard barefoot. Now they were plotting to rip the roots of my life out from under me. I stood there in silence, hidden by the shadows of the apple tree. My hands trembled, but not from weakness, from fury I refused to show. Neighbors later whispered about me, saying, "She's old, maybe it's time she let go of that big house." Even friends hinted I should think about simplifying. But none of them understood. This wasn't just a house. It was 50 years of love, loss, sweat, and sacrifice. It was the place where my husband took his last breath, where my children took their first steps. And if they thought they could take it from me easily, they were about to learn what 70 really looks like when it's betrayed. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every word my children had spoken echoing in my ears. "She won't even realize what she's signing." They thought age had dulled me. They mistook my silence for weakness. That was their first mistake. The next morning, I went to the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were the papers my husband and I had guarded for decades, our deed, our wills, our marriage license. I laid them out on the table, each page a weapon they had forgotten I still possessed. With careful hands, I photocopied everything, every stamp, every signature, every record that proved the house was mine. The clerk at the copy shop gave me a curious look, as if wondering why an old woman carried such important files in a plain grocery bag. I only smiled. Let him wonder. A week later, I walked into a law office that smelled faintly of leather and dust. The man who greeted me was older now, but I recognized him instantly. Henry Clark, my late husband's old friend and once the sharpest lawyer in town. He raised his eyebrows. "It's been a long time, Margaret. What brings you here?" I set the folder of documents on his desk, steady and deliberate. My voice was low, but it didn't shake. "My children are trying to sell my home behind my back. I need to stop them." For a moment, he studied me, perhaps expecting tears or hesitation, but all he saw was fire. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile forming. "They don't know who they are up against, do they?" I met his eyes and answered simply, "No, but they are about to." From that day forward, my house became more than a home. It became my battlefield, and I was preparing for war, silently, carefully, one document at a time. The courthouse smelled of old wood and polish, the kind of place where truth and lies sit side by side, waiting for the gavel to decide which will survive. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy dress, my silver hair pinned neatly back. My children sat across from me, polished and smug, as if they had already won. My eldest son leaned toward his lawyer, whispering with a grin. My daughter sat straight, her pearls gleaming under the lights, eyes fixed on me like I was nothing more than a stubborn obstacle. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Papers shuffled. The case was called. Their attorney stood first, his tone dripping with practiced sympathy. "Your Honor, my clients are simply trying to act in the best interest of their mother. At 70 years old, she can no longer care for such a large property. The house is unmanageable, and the proceeds from the sale would ensure her comfort in a proper facility." My daughter nodded along, tilting her head in mock concern. My son even sighed, like a dutiful child burdened with responsibility. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Whittaker, do you have anything to say?" For a moment, I let the silence stretch. My hands rested calmly on the folder I had brought, the same one I had prepared with Henry. Then, slowly, I rose. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady, "they claim this house is theirs to sell, but they've forgotten something." I laid the photocopied deed and original documents onto the table before the judge. The courtroom leaned forward as I continued. "This house has never been in their name. It was built by my husband and me, paid for by our sweat, our sacrifice, and our signatures. And unless the law has changed, no one can sell what was never theirs." I turned, finally letting my gaze rest on my children. My words cut through the air like a blade. "You tried to sell something that never belonged to you." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My son's face flushed crimson. My daughter's smirk vanished. Their lawyer stumbled, reaching for papers that suddenly looked like scraps of nothing. The judge examined the documents, then looked back at me, eyes sharp. "Mrs. Whittaker," he said, "these records are clear, very clear." For the first time that day, I let myself smile, because the clash they thought I would lose had only just begun. The judge's fingers tapped lightly on the desk as he skimmed through my documents. Every page flipped was like a drumbeat, and with each turn, I saw my children's confidence drain. Finally, he set the papers down and adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Whittaker's ownership is undeniable," he said firmly. "But there's another matter here, these financial statements." My lawyer, Henry, rose with perfect timing, sliding another folder onto the bench. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of unauthorized withdrawals made by her children over the past year." Gasps whispered through the courtroom. The judge's brow furrowed as he examined the bank records. Line after line of transactions, money siphoned quietly, funneled into accounts under my son's name, my daughter's name. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. I could feel the heat of their panic from across the room. The judge's voice grew sharper. "So not only were you attempting to sell a property that is not yours, but you've also been misusing your mother's finances." My son stammered, his voice cracking for the first time. It was for her care, Your Honor." My daughter leaned forward desperately. "We only wanted what was best." The judge silenced them with one thunderous strike of the gavel. "Enough. The petition to sell the property is denied. Full ownership and control remain with Mrs. Whittaker, and these financial irregularities will be forwarded to the district attorney's office for review." The courtroom seemed to exhale at once. Reporters scribbled furiously. A few spectators even nodded, satisfied. I stood a little taller, not because I had won, but because they had finally been unmasked. Not by my rage, not by my tears, but by the truth they thought I was too old to gather. My children sat frozen, pale, stripped of their smugness. In that moment, they weren't my heirs. They were just defendants caught in the light of their own greed. And I, 70 years old, the woman they thought too fragile was the one holding that light steady. The trial ended, but I didn't rush out of the courthouse. I walked slowly, each step measured, the way my husband used to walk after finishing a hard day's work. Henry offered me his arm, but I shook my head. My legs still carried me just fine. When I got home, the late afternoon sun poured across the porch, gilding the old bricks in gold. The same porch where my children once sat with popsicles dripping down their chins. The same porch where my husband kissed me goodnight after long shifts. I lowered myself onto the swing, its chains creaking softly, and set a steaming cup of tea on the table beside me. In my lap lay the folder of papers, no longer just documents, but proof that memory, love, and grit were stronger than greed. Across the street, a neighbor tipped his hat. Children pedaled their bikes past, waving. Life went on, but something in the air had shifted. My children, they never came that evening. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they were angry, maybe both. But their absence didn't sting the way I thought it would. Because as the apple trees swayed in the evening breeze, I realized something. I hadn't just defended a house. I had defended a legacy. I took a slow sip of tea, then whispered to the empty yard, though I knew the words carried far beyond it. Old doesn't mean powerless. It means I've survived long enough to know how to fight and win. The swing rocked gently, the sun dipped lower, and for the first time in weeks I felt at peace.